right, Lucy, welcome to Firm and Final. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, no problem. So do me a favor and tell everybody where you're currently sitting.
I'm currently sitting in my parents' home in London, actually, having just got back from a business trip in Dublin with a Dutch client. So yeah, a
Wow.
little bit transatlantic at the moment.
Yeah, so when I first met you, Lucy, you were working in London and
Yeah.
then you moved to New York City. So the question on everybody's mind, what's the better world-class city? Is it London or is it New York?
Actually, from a business perspective, I do prefer New York, which I think surprises everyone. Just because obviously London has that famous kind of everything's in Lloyd's, you see everyone every day. But I think having done that for a bit of for a number of years, I kind of prefer the New York way of doing things. But from a living standard, the cost of living in New York is pretty upsetting. So I'd probably put
Yeah.
London above New York in that branch. But otherwise, yeah, I probably prefer New York, which I know most people find that surprising. But yeah, it's New York for me at the moment. I'd probably caveat that with.
Do me a favor and tell everybody where you work today and how you ended up from London to New York.
Yeah, so I started sort of in the London market of like 17 years ago, and worked at a couple of broking houses there, pretty well known sort of global broking houses. And then, sort of, last role prior to moving to the States was with BMS Group in London. And the way we're kind of split as a company is we have BMS Group as the sort of overall parent entity. And then within that, we have BMS Re, which is the US reinsurance piece. And I was working on the group side of things, sort of implementing an international A&H book, and the opportunity came up to take the same sort of role in the US. So yeah, I was asked to relocate from London originally to Chicago, but I was a bit nervous with
Yeah.
Chicago because of the weather and because I didn't know
Why?
anyone. So we kind of
The
I'm not
weather
a
here
fan
is
of the
great.
snow. Well, actually saying that, I know this year I think you guys have had a nicer winter than we have in New York.
Yeah, this was a mild
A good
winter for
one.
us, no doubt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we had snow this year, which I managed to avoid last year, so I kind of got an easy start to it, and then this year I think I experienced a real New York winter. But yeah, and New York, I knew some people, and there's more sort of people that I like, friends and family and stuff that travel to New York more. So just for the opening, it sort of made more sense for it to be New York. But
Got it.
yeah, so that's how it kind of ended up being a move.
So have you always worked in reinsurance?
So I've always done. I think it's a little different on the London side. It's not split so evenly. A lot of people cross between the two. So I've always done both. So
Okay.
yeah, from right from the outset, insurance and reinsurance.
So I'm curious, like, how did you even end up in this career path of insurance and reinsurance?
I don't know what many people say to this. In London, there's this common answer that says nobody sort of actively seeks out an insurance or reinsurance career. They kind of just fall
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah.
Which definitely was the case with me. Like, I didn't have connections into it in any way. My first job was kind of an administration role at an insurance broker, and I didn't really even know what insurance was at that point. I was quite young. And so I started there and just kind of ended up staying in that industry by default, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. That seems to be the path for a lot of different people in our career. But what
Yeah.
did you study in college, or what were you preparing to do before you got into the insurance industry?
So I wanted to originally I was sort of looking at law. If you ask my family, they'd probably say it's because I like to have an argument. But I
Yeah.
think that ties probably in well with the broking side of things. So yeah, I was looking at law. That was what I wanted to go into. It's a slightly different structure here in the US because we have secondary school, then college, then university. So we have these 2 years in the middle between 16 and 18. And I actually sort of did the first period of that and then went straight out to work instead of going on to university. So, yeah, I kind of started at 17 in the insurance industry,
Wow.
having thought I was going to study law, but just decided that I wanted to go to work instead, apparently.
So you must really enjoy your work if you got right into it and stayed into it. What's something about like this career path that you truly enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly do, to be honest. Obviously, there's ups and downs. There's days that we like it more than others, but I do like my career, and I always wanted to be a sort of career person. I was always career driven, so that was kind of why I started early. I genuinely was like, I just want to go to work, which
Yeah.
actually now, so many years later, maybe I should have rethought that decision and had a few years at university. But yeah, I do enjoy it. And I kind of, it's such a people driven industry for us, which I think is the bit I like best. We're pretty unique in that way. Like, I think even other industries that previously used to be like that, it's kind of come back a bit and maybe is not so much that way anymore. And we've definitely stayed as an industry still very people driven, relationship driven. And I just love that sort of interaction of it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough that a lot of the people I trade with, underwriters, clients, they're friends now. We've known each other for a long time. It kind of makes it a nice industry to work in.
Yeah, absolutely. But every day is not roses and sunshine, right? So, what's a part of
No,
the industry that you maybe don't like?
I think sort of being on the production side, I would say it's very hard to switch off. I don't
Yeah.
think, I actually was on holiday recently with a friend who's in the industry, but not on the production side. And the difference between what it's like on a vacation for people that kind of can literally pick up something, pass it over for a week, and then pick it
Yeah.
up a week later. I don't think sort of the broking production side of things really has that break in it. But again, I think if you get into that side of it, it's normally because you like that sort of constant like driving of business and that pressure side of it deep down, I guess. But yeah, not the easiest to switch off from, I would probably say.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. It's hard to flip the switch.
Yeah.
When you're going, and regardless of day off, PTO, vacation, holiday, whatever you wanna call it, it's really hard to shut that switch off.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think also there's that kind of, you don't want to shut it off in case you miss, like, particularly on the opportunity side, you're kind of like, well, I don't want to not do something for a week in case something comes along that would have been a great opportunity and I've now
Yeah.
missed it because I didn't look. So yeah, that would probably be the hardest piece of it. It's kind of constant, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I want to explore a little bit. You mentioned that, you had your start in the London markets. And when you think about that, you think of Lloyd's, right?
I guess I'd liken it to the stock market. It's a trading floor with, multiple different insurers, reinsurers, managing agents for every broker to go and approach with, whatever class of business they handle to that specific syndicate that writes that piece. So, say I used to do a lot of Latin American sort of accident business. So you'd go in the mornings, there's trading hours. It's very sort of structured. The doors open at 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. You go in, you queue up to see the various underwriters. And I guess the piece that's very different to the US is you will have your competitor standing directly behind you whilst
Okay.
you're broking that piece of business. So everyone knows everything about everyone's business.
Really?
Um, yeah, it's very, and when we show pictures of it to clients that have never been there, it's such an odd sort of thing to see because one insurer is sat here and directly next to them is their competitor, and the brokers are all competing with each other. You can pick up terms from one syndicate, walk 2 meters away from them, and see if that syndicate will give you better terms. But that's the whole point of it being a trading.
How are they able to turn around an underwriting result? I'm trying to put it into the context of what we do, right? So if you're doing like stop loss or medical excess of loss, you're going to this trading floor and asking for a better excess of loss rate from somebody?
Well, the point being really that everyone has different appetites. Everyone has different ways of looking at a risk. So, and obviously not every piece of business they write is profitable. Some of it will be really profitable. That's just the swings and roundabouts of it. But the point really should be that each syndicate you go to, unless you're looking to syndicate a piece of business, and then really you're going to go to multiple and ask for exactly the same terms, which in theory was probably the model that Lloyd's were originally sort of set up for. Again, completely different, I guess, from the US because people write things 100% a lot more out there. So generally, you'd get your lead terms, they'd take a 20% share, and then you'd sort of spend the next few days walking around Lloyd's with their competitors, asking if they're willing to support it, get it up to the 100%. But they all have different appetites. So someone might really like accident business, they're coming in at X rate. You might go somewhere else and they really like medical business, so their accident rate might be double what the other person's got just because they're not that experienced in it or they don't have the book to offset it. So
Okay.
really you tend to just learn whose appetite is what, and that's how you drive kind of where you go with it.
That's very interesting. So that platform still exists today? Is it like the same format or has it changed? Like I'm thinking to like the US like stock exchanges and like the old trading floors are gone here now, right? It's all electronic.
Yeah.
So how does it work at Lloyd's?
Yeah, they Lloyd's definitely made a big push. Gosh, probably about 10 years back, it started to make things a lot more electronically driven. And obviously, I think a lot of the time it's to do with bringing costs down and that side of things. So there is more of a side of that now for sort of getting contracts signed and getting information over. I think most brokers would tell you in London that they still want to do the day to day going into Lloyd's to get the terms. And one of the things I've definitely seen between the difference between the US and London that is maybe more of a frustrating side is that I'm used to being able to go there and then to see an underwriter, sit with them and discuss it and have the answer by the end of the day or, and in the US, obviously that's slightly different. You have to, it's done on email or you have to wait to meet them. Like, so I think in London that trading floors did exist because people want that quick sort of pace
Yeah.
of getting the business done. And that's also what Lloyd's has been famous for a long time. So it's there. It's it's definitely more electronic than it used to be, but also I think COVID has had a pretty significant impact on it in that it used to be Monday to Friday, 11 till 1, and then 2 till sort of 4:35. It was packed. And if you went to see an underwriter, generally you queued. Sometimes you could be queuing for like 45 minutes to see someone. But I think now it's much more people are there on specific days. You kind of pre plan the days that you know the underwriter is going to be there. But
Yeah.
that has been driven largely by COVID more so than anyone trying to sort of change the way the trading floor works.
I got a London trip coming up this year because the Bears are playing in London. I feel like I
Oh,
need to make a stop at the Lloyd's platform and check it out.
you should, yeah, yeah. I mean, anyone that goes over there should see it. Absolutely, actually even the way the building's built is crazy because the lifts are built on the outside, so that if there was ever sort of any changes made, there's no disruption to the trading floors. Like it's a really interesting looking building, and then when you go
Yeah.
inside, it does look like a stock exchange. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna put that on my list, and I'm gonna talk to you about it before I go out there.
Yes, we'll get someone to give you a tour of the Lloyd's library and kind of all the history of it. That's
Oh,
generally
that would
what
be
people like
awesome.
to see when they're.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be awesome. So you moved to New York. So tell me, what is it like
Yeah.
now working in the US? And are you focused more on US A&H business?
Yeah, I mean, we still have a few sort of international MGUs that I've dealt with for a number of years. That and it's just a relationship piece that kind of it stayed like that. But predominantly, yeah, it's like 99% US now. I mean, I when I accepted the role, and I think the management of BMS thought I was a little crazy for this. I was kind of like, oh, I'll try and keep doing it all, and I'll make it work from the States. But probably within about 3 months, it became evident that that was going to be a bit tricky to
Hey,
do.
it's hard to manage all the time zones and all the different
Yeah.
client needs and timings of that.
Yeah, and to be honest with the US, there's just so much opportunity and so much going on there that you spend 100% of your time on that anyway. Really, I think
Yeah.
if it was a different sort of territory and there was less happening, maybe you could try and juggle it. But there's just so much opportunity for us out there that it makes sense to be sort of driven that way now.
So you feel like there's a lot of opportunity in the US A&H space. What's something that could be like a big risk to that opportunity?
The thing with the US that's slightly different to some of the international places is that the government plays a role a lot in what people are buying, what things look like. I mean, obviously, particularly in the medical side of things, your
Yeah.
government are very heavily involved in what's allowed to happen, what's not. That's very different to what we'd see elsewhere. So I think when there's elections and things like that, I guess there's always a chance of is that going to change what the dynamics look like a bit and the sort of
Yeah.
regulation piece of it. I mean, sort of global situations that go on, I would say from where we sit within the A&H market, I don't see that it has that much of an impact. I would have said that that was more to the previous business I worked on. But obviously, things that are happening sort of around the rest of the world at some point do end up having some sort of knock on impact on things. But I think, yeah, it's largely government sort of stuff and also the like purely medically, the sort of cost of things that are going on with the drugs and what can be afforded, and that's definitely something that in the US is spectacular compared to everywhere else in the world, I would say.
Yes, it
So
is. Yeah, the
yeah,
costs here are sky high, which kind of necessitates insurance solutions, reinsurance solutions.
yeah,
The cost continuing to go up. actually press forward those needs. But you think at some point it gets to a point where like the whole system blows up because it just can't absorb all those expenses anymore. And that's why we spend a lot of time in gene therapy, because we just
Mhm.
see that there's such a need for solutions around it. These things cost $3 to $4 million.
Yeah.
It's just outrageous.
Yeah, and I think, and the flip side of it as well is, we've seen some things come in recently where there's sort of regulations changing around what employers have to give from a benefit standpoint, and there's new products coming out because of things like IVF as a result of that and stuff like that. So it has its ups and its downs. Like, some of it's concerning, and then other sides you see kind of good opportunity coming out of it. But it's definitely a very unique market in that way. And I'll be
Yes.
honest, was a shock to me. Like, even when I moved out there, coming from a country that has a national health service,
Yeah.
to then try to navigate my own health insurance in the US was an interesting first few months in the States, I'd
Well, I'll
say.
tell you what, there's people who work in insurance here for a long time, and they have a hard time
Yeah,
navigating like the health insurance, just the needs as a patient, and then like the insurance side and paying for
yeah.
bills. Like that's a tough task for people who even work in the industry.
It is. I mean, it's funny. I've got a few other sort of expat Brits that I'm friends with in the States who send their medical, like their company medical renewals over to me saying, what should I go
Yeah.
for? Because from a UK standpoint, we have never really had to look at anything like that. Even if you have private health insurance here, it's so different to
Yeah.
what it is in the US. So that was a learning curve. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Lucy, I'm curious. You've worked in London, you've worked in New York, and to make a big move like that is not an easy thing to do, right? I'm curious, like, do you work with like a mentor? Has somebody ever given you guidance on like what you should do next in your career?
Not like a sort of specific role of a mentor, but I definitely, the person I worked for sort of very early on in my career, I stayed working with them probably for sort of 10 years or so, kind of changed companies with them, and I'm still like very close with them. And I'm kind of lucky in that way. There may be, if they watch this and they hear me say this wrong, then they'll tell me about it. But I'd say they're
Yeah.
probably about 10 years older than me.
All right.
Um, and still in the industry. And I'm very lucky to have support from people like that who are sort of a little bit older, been in the industry a bit longer, and have sort of guided me in terms of either if I've worked with them and giving me opportunities that have kind of helped to getting to what I'm doing today, or just giving sort of guidance on things they've experienced that I might sort of experience a few years later. I had a friend, he actually now works at BMS, who had relocated at our previous company from London to Dubai, and then Dubai to Singapore. And he kind of gave me a few pieces of advice, which his advice when I moved abroad was basically say yes to every invite you get, no matter what it is, just to go and meet people, which is fine at first, but I think you have to sort of calm that down a bit at some point. But so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not really a specific mentor, but definitely there's probably like a core group of people that I started working with early in my career who I'm still very close with. We're all still in the
Sure.
industry, and we kind of lean on each other a lot between all of us to kind of keep up with what's going on and give advice on various different things that we're all going through. So there's like a core group of us that are pretty good for that sort of thing for each other.
That's great. Yeah, you need that. You need that fellowship with a group of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I guess that helped also in London. We were all sort of growing up in this crazy industry
Yeah.
together, and have all, actually, a piece of advice my first line manager they gave me was be nice to the junior underwriters when you're the junior, because they'll be the senior underwriters
There
when
you
you're
go.
the, yeah. And it's so true. Like those people that I grew up with when I was like 18, 19, and now running, A&H syndicates in Lloyd's. And so that was definitely, yeah, that's a good piece of advice that I would say came from someone older that is 100% correct.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great piece of advice. What about, I don't see a lot of women that are reinsurance brokers. Has that been a challenge for you in this industry?
Yes. Yeah, there is definitely, I don't think it's specific to reinsurance either. I think it's on the insurance side as well. And I
Yeah,
know everyone's trying drastically to sort of even that out a bit more. Um, it's, yeah, I guess when you're young, if I look back to when I was like sort of 21 or 22 and I walked into a meeting, I would have been probably the only female in that meeting room.
yeah,
And now I look back and think, I don't know how I did that without panicking a lot, but I think you're just in this mode to kind of, you persevere, you do it. And in the end, you probably end up not really noticing it. Like, I was talking to a friend the other day who sort of similar space as me in the industry, been in it for about the same amount of time. And we were saying, when we look back what it was like probably 10 years ago, you don't notice that you're the only female in that room. You don't notice sort
Yeah.
of how male heavy the industry is. But obviously now there's so much awareness of it that probably younger people in the industry do see it more, because everyone's kind of making a point of saying that needs evening out, that needs rectifying. So yeah, that's been a tough one, I would say. Yeah.
Why do you think the insurance industry has a hard time attracting women to it?
I don't really know. I mean, some people have said that it's because it's not glamorous enough, but I don't really know what industry you would say would be the glamorous one. But I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I don't also think that that's necessarily specific to our industry. I think that's most industries. It's just kind of historically how things have been, and there's probably a smaller pool to pick from because of that, and it's just kind
Yeah.
of the way it goes. But a lot of it is sort of past issues that are now being rectified and that have taken time to sort of unravel, and now we're in a very different spot with it, and things are a lot more sort of balanced. But I wouldn't say, for me, if I went back to being like 17 and someone said, now knowing what it was going to be like for the first sort of 10 years or whatever, would you still go into it? I would still say yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's a reason that it's become that way.
Yeah, I think diversity happens kind of organically, but you have to start at the bottom, which is you
Yeah,
hire, the next crop of 22-year-olds. You have to hire the right mix of males and females and different colors and ethnicities. And then
yeah,
over time, like what you said before, be nice to that junior underwriter because they're going to
yeah.
become the senior underwriter. It's like a problem that could fix itself, but it takes like a dedicated movement early on in people's careers.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just, it's a different mindset for people that have probably been in the industry for a very long time,
Yeah.
and you've got to kind of work on that piece. But I do think that there's definitely been such a huge move to make things better and to rectify that across all sort of areas of the diversification piece of the industry. And I think luckily we're moving in the right direction. Definitely
Yeah.
still some work to be done, but we're moving in the right direction.
Definitely some work to be done. I would think that a lot of your role has to do with business development. I'm curious, like, how do you use social media for the purposes of business development? Does that play a role in like the way you do your work?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny now. I guess when you hear the name of a person or you hear the name of a company, the first thing you do is look on LinkedIn. You look
Yeah.
to see who you've got in common with them, kind of where they've worked before. So, from a business development standpoint, that you want to look on there and find out that there's something you can connect on in common that's going to be like an easy door opener, or
Right.
you know you might see that there's a reinsurer on there that you're close with. So then immediately the first thing you're doing is calling up that reinsurer and sort of finding out what you can about that client. So I think things like LinkedIn make a huge difference in terms of the knowledge we have of clients before we approach them. And also kind of, I mean, we've had clients approach us just from LinkedIn. Like, people have won business via people just approaching them on LinkedIn. So it's obviously a huge go-to now.
Yeah.
Um, I'm probably not the most active poster on LinkedIn. I probably should get better, to be honest. But yeah, I know instantly the first thing you do is look at a name, look at a company, look at a reinsurer, and find out what you can off of LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And probably, I can't think when LinkedIn first sort of launched, but what you put on it then in terms of your background would be so different to now, because now you're conscious that everyone is using that as a tool to find out more about you or your company.
I'm a little bit older than you, so I remember when LinkedIn came out. It was like 2006, 2007. And at that time, if you went out on LinkedIn and like enhanced your profile, it was immediately, "Oh, that person's looking for a job.
Oh
They're
yeah,
not gonna be here in, like,
yeah,
the next 3 weeks. They're gonna be out of here." They're, like, brushing up their resume. So it's kinda like
yeah.
a joke that if people went to do that, then they were looking for, like, their next gig.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, because I think originally it was kind of used for that, wasn't it? Like people were like,
It was purely, like, job hopping related, and
yeah,
now it's more I would say now it's more networking and learning and
yeah,
obviously a place where you can source business, but source individuals too if you wanted to.
yeah. Yeah, and also you kind of get a good idea of someone's personality from it as well, And if you're looking at trying to build a relationship with a new client, that's really helpful. That if they're posting something that's showing I don't know that they're really into a certain type of football. At least you've got like a football team. Like at least you've got a door opener there that you can talk to them about. Like it's a good way to get to know someone without actually having even met them.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're gonna shift over into some like rapid fire questions. Are you ready for these?
Yep.
All right. So tell me three words that best describe a career in reinsurance.
I would say entrepreneurial, probably secure and dynamic.
All right, I like that. So forget LinkedIn, not the professional Lucy. Where are we most likely to find the personal Lucy? Is it TikTok, Snapchat, or Instagram?
Instagram.
Why Instagram?
It's more, particularly living abroad. Actually, I guess it's more just a way to keep in, like to put the photos on for your family to see, like that sort of thing. I do use TikTok, but it causes me some issues with some shopping habits that I have. So I'm kind of limiting myself to that and sticking with Instagram. And I've never used Snapchat. I don't
All
have
right,
Snapchat. So,
me
yeah,
either. I don't know the first thing about Snapchat or
no.
TikTok. I do like the scroll on Instagram, but I don't know how to post on there. I whenever I mention that to like my cousins, they all laugh at me, but I don't know how to do it.
To post on the scrolling part of Instagram.
Yeah.
I don't know that either, to be fair.
What about for somebody new who's starting in this industry? Would you suggest to them to work, if in specifically in the reinsurance segment? Would you tell them to work at a reinsurer, or would you tell them to work at a broker?
I mean, I would probably say they want to try a bit of both, but if they were going to pick one, maybe a reinsurer at this point.
All right, good. What about if you could do it all over again and you didn't pursue a career in reinsurance? What career path would you have picked?
I think it would have been something in law. Yeah.
What type of law you think?
I mean, it would. I like the corporate side of things. I mean, I guess sometimes it's a bit like almost gossipy, but everyone likes the employment law side of things. So yeah, probably that would have been of interest, I'd say.
Okay. All right, so here's my toughest question for you.
Okay.
Especially for like new people coming into the industry. What is your take on work from home? Is this a career that you can do from your home, or is it better to be inside the office?
I think can you do it from your home? Yes. I think you're not going to see the side of it that most people like if you do it from your home. I like the kind of hybrid thing. I think that works. Like if I look at the amount I can clear in a day if I'm at home, it's probably more than if I'm in the office.
Sure.
But for new people to learn and to sort of get to know their colleagues and to understand what's needed, I don't think that's going to be the same from home. Like for me, if someone was brand new into the industry, I would say they have to start in the office.
That is the sentiment that I hear a lot.
Yeah,
But I do think we're like in a different stage, especially post COVID. And especially since there's so many companies that are starting up at the moment that have no like footprint, no
yeah,
infrastructure, no office, and it's fully remote. And so it's almost like a competitive landscape too, that if you want to go be able to grab talent and that talent wants to be able to work from home, you have to provide them that opportunity. But
yeah.
most of the people who I've interviewed on this platform have shared the same sentiment that you have.
Yeah, and I think that the nicest thing of our industry is the people side of it and sort of the interaction. And if you don't have that side of it, if you're working from home full time, I just think you would miss the bit that most people like best about it.
That is very well said. We're going to turn this around now, Lucy, and I'm going to let you ask me a question about anything you want to know.
Sure. So I gave this some thought. I was thinking, I'm interested to know your thoughts on the AI piece sort of going forward, because as with most companies, I guess we're predominantly on the P&C side, and their view of AI and insurtechs is definitely further forward thinking than
Yeah.
where we're currently at in the A&H market. But I think at some point it's going to have to start shifting just the way the rest of the world is. So I'm interested to know kind of your thoughts on that, and even when that happens, your view on having like a strong algorithm behind an AI product against having an individual underwriter as we
Yeah.
would do now.
Yeah, I think it depends what segment you're talking about. So let's say you're talking about reinsurance versus let's say stop loss insurance versus first dollar fully insured coverage, right? So if first dollar is let's say that that's $100, that's the value, then stop loss is probably $10 to $15, and reinsurance is somewhere between 50 cents to $1.50, right? That kind of gives you like the scale. And I think for AI solutions, really the back end of an AI solution is the amount of data that feeds into it. Well,
Yeah.
in the fully insured space, because you have 100, right, you have a lot more data to feed into it, which makes
Mhm.
using AI a more valuable outcome, like really at like first dollar coverages. Once you get to stop loss and you get to medical excess, I think it's a different story. Once you get to like $100 to $150,000 stop loss level, the level of variability in outcomes is just extremely different from network to network, geography to geography, underlying payer, whether it's like a buka carrier versus like a TPA. If you have reference based pricing, there's just so many different iterations that could change the outcome. Now, you could probably say, well, why don't you feed all that data
Yeah.
into the algorithm and let the algorithm sort it out? Well, the reality is a lot of that data is not really made available, right? We're starting to change. Like when you look at the transparency data that's hitting because of some laws that got passed a few years ago, more and more of that information is coming out, but it's point in time information,
Yeah.
and the next contract iteration is not known to anybody. And so I think for those reasons, it makes it very difficult. Once you get to like medical excess claims above $1 million, even above $2 million, I, I just think that like the rate of volatility there is way too high for AI to know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you need a little bit more human intervention. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. I focus a lot on gene therapy. These are genetic disorders, genetic issues. You, in looking at data, may not know that a parent is carrying some type of gene that gets passed down to their child. And when that claim happens, it's a completely unknown, unexpected claim. There's no way to have the data to know that this particular population has a higher prevalence for spinal muscular atrophy. It's just you're not going to get that level of
Yeah.
information. So I do think that there's a role for AI. I definitely have seen it in the PNC space. It's really exploded in that space. I tell you what, this was like a really scary kind of scene for me, but this is probably 2018 or 19. I went to one of MRM's largest reinsurers at the time, and they're a PNC company that had an A&H segment. And I went to go visit them, walked on the floor, gigantic floor, not a single person on the floor. This is back in 2018. And I asked them, I'm like, where's all the people? They're like, we don't need people anymore. We
Oh,
shifted
wow.
over to more like AI and more to like algorithmic underwriting,
Yeah.
and that reduced the need for the level of underwriting talent that they had. That was specifically on the PNC side. So they've definitely on that side have adopted those tools and those new ways of underwriting better than the A and
Yeah.
H market has. And I do think that you're starting to see that in the fully insured space from carriers, but I think to stop loss and medical excess, it's probably a ways down.
Yeah, and I guess as well from an NH perspective, there's restrictions around what can be shared and what can't as well. Anyway,
That's
which would
right.
be completely different to the PNC side of things as well. I think in an ideal world, there'd be sort of the happy medium of having a bit more of the AI-driven automated piece, but keeping the human piece to it as well. Because the example you just gave, you don't want to lose that human piece just in general. Like I said earlier, it's the nice piece of the industry, so we don't want to hand everything over to AI. But
Maybe
yeah,
you and I should leave our jobs and start up a company to do exactly that. What do you think?
my use of technology would probably make me concerning to be the person that started that company. I think, yeah, not
Very
sure that
good. Very
might be.
good. Well, why don't we wrap it up with one last question, Lucy? Just give me one piece of advice for somebody who's newly considering the reinsurance, the insurance, and even like the self-funded industry.
I would say absorb everything you can, like listen to everything you can, like, even if you're looking at starting just in stop loss, but you get invited to a meeting that's nothing to do with stop loss, it's casualty, I still would go to that. Learn
Yeah.
as much as you can, take on as much as you can, And then when you're talking to other people, clients, underwriters, just be prepared. Like I remember
Yeah.
when I first started broking, I used to make one of my friends sit in a meeting room with me and pretend to be the underwriter so that
Okay.
I could practice the broke.
Yeah.
So I guess like I would say be like take on everything you can and then be prepared to be able to sort of articulate that to the people you need to.
Yeah. That's awesome advice. Thank you. Thank you for
Thanks.
that. And Lucy, thanks for joining us on this edition of Firm and Final.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. We'll let you
Thanks,
go.
Mehb.
Take care.
Bye.